I have had the experience of some of the challenges of diffusing the innovation. So before I start, let me just do a quick check. How many early stage founders or innovators are there in the audience today? I know there were about 50%. Right. We do have a small group. Great. So what I would like to cover today is based on my experience of having spent almost 3 decades in the pharma industry at Eli Lilly and Novartis. And while I have spent time in the commercial world, I also spent a lot of time in the drug development world, supporting my colleagues in the execution of trials and even more in the deployment of resources strategically for them. And while doing so, and even with visits with monitors to clinics or to medical centers, I realized that there are one heck of a lot of operational challenges that take place. And because of family brushes with ill health, I've always wondered why it takes so much time for drugs to go through the development chain. And Bloqucube is our humble attempt to maybe make some of those cogs go faster. So the world of drug development is pretty complex. And as a founder, the first thing is, where do you want to focus? And working with the lean startup process, we decided to focus on clinical trials operations space, which, that's almost 26% of spend in $100 billion a year that is spent in drug development. And if you take a look at it today, and this unfortunately has been the case for the past X number of years, there are a heck of a lot of operational inadequacies. And with the movement to decentralized clinical trials, these inefficiencies have got exacerbated. Sadly, because of all this flow of paper and processes, there also have been issues related to data integrity. In fact, there's data that suggests that up to 17% of data that is gathered in some of the trials can be suspect in some studies. And finally, what has been particularly troubling for me has been the vast amount of data that shows that the physicians and the sites and the hospitals that are actually conducting the trials are the guys that get paid late. They're the guys who get delivered late. And so if you have, for example, a cancer patient participating in a trial, potentially in a terminal stage, if you do not pay the person immediately, you really wonder what is the point. So we've looked at these pain points and we said we'd like to address it. And our approach has been slightly different. The first part is we're working with smart tablets, and we worked in the Apple ecosystem. But even more, we've gone onto the cloud, so it's a cloud-based. So we've really taken it into wherever you can get an internet service. But even more importantly, and unlike a lot of other existing systems, we are pioneers in the application of blockchain technology for the clinical trials software systems. There was a time when you had something called the Long Island Tea Company that said they would put that onto a blockchain and boom, their stock price went up. So unfortunately, there's been a lot of hype, a lot of irresponsible exuberance, but even more, people have forgotten that the essence of the technology is one of delivering real-time information. And even more are the powerful algorithms that go behind the scene. And what we have tried to do is to integrate that and to bring it all together so when an activity takes place, the site can get paid. So the way the system has been built up, it's been built for 4 critical people. One is the sponsor, who is really concerned about doing the trial with the correct regulatory conditions. We talk about the site administrator because they have got tons of paper or regulatory documents and binders we brought together. We also have the physician, who is basically the PI, who is really responsible for getting it done, and then the monitoring boards. And we brought all this together and we started building it up slowly. And our first trial was a beta test that was done about 3 years back. And now we have come to the point that the flywheel has started moving together. We are very fortunate that leading companies, tech companies that validate our software have shown that we have a technological lead over some leading companies. And last year, we are particularly proud that Pre-Galleon, which is considered to be one of the key prizes or awards for pharma innovation, considered as the only startup in the clinical trial software space to have brought it together. And the reason why we brought all this together is we are standing on the shoulders of some very smart people who have been colleagues of mine at Novartis. So our vision really is not to stop here, but to lay the foundation where you can turn people from being healthcare producers, from turning them from being healthcare consumers into healthcare producers. So we're taking steps to that. As we built this product and took it through, I encountered quite a lot of challenges. But the fundamental reason why we're doing all this is that in today's world, the pharma world is confronted by diminishing returns. R&D productivity is decreasing. There's challenges with the growth, and growth parameters are declining. If you even look at the peak sales that can come through, or competitors following on the heels, that is decreasing. And the net result is people are decreasing the pharma R&D spend that is there. This data comes from an ex-colleague at Novartis, but it came together in a few years back, but conceptually, it's still the same. And the other challenge is that the number of targets that are there in terms of proteins are only 1% of the total amount. So if we do not use technology to break the barriers, how else are we going to deliver speedier solutions to even more diverse patient base that we need to do? Most of you are aware of Moore's law. So the question that we have to ask ourselves as a community is, why does this law not apply to operational processes in our industry? And it is with that question in mind that I've been looking at some of the issues relating to innovation. Now, very often if you go through an accelerator program, they'll talk about the innovation diffusion curve. And this is a model done by Everett Rogers, which basically is talking about that the innovators are a very narrow segment, but all the innovators are really trying to tap into the early adopters. Those are the guys who are willing to take a risk. But even after that, there is a challenge in trying to bridge the chasm, which goes to the early majority group. And that is, these three stages are part of the challenge that we have in our industry also. If you take a look, it will take time, it will take effort, but my ex-company's CEO, Dr. Vas Narasimhan, talked about innovation and implementation. So it's not enough to have a smart product, but unless we execute and deliver it, it's not really complete. But the implementation piece has got two sides of the coin, not just the founder's part of building a solution that is a good value proposition, but also one where it falls on fertile soil. And that is the challenge that comes together from a diffusion perspective. There's a very interesting study done by the famous Tufts Institute with Messrs. Getz, Flores, and Harper. And they talked about looking for empirical evidence in the diffusion of innovation. If you look at general treatises, you'll find a lot of text, but very specifically in the area of drug development and empirical evidence was a lot less. And so they looked and talked to about 17 companies of different sizes, both pharma, biotech, and CROs. They administered almost 631 questionnaires and basically saw and found that CROs were a lot less risk averse than the pharma and biotech companies. But what was very clearly present for both is that the time taken to implement innovation from start to finish was almost 6 years. The actual range was from 5.8 to 6.8. And these were the 4 stages that were there. And the challenge was that the adoption decision and the implementation decision was the one that took the maximum amount of time. This is from a McKinsey study post decentralized trials. And you can see that the hybrid piece is the one that comes more and more kind of to focus. And they basically talked about all the elements that were present in terms of decentralized trials. Now, the whole growth of teleconsulting, everything is all coming together over here. But they opine that most trials will not be fully virtual, but they'll be using different parameters based on the endpoints. So our challenge is that as I was interviewing my advisors, they said that this is an industry, talking about our drug development industry, where we're using 15th century operational systems with 21st century science. It's a bit like taking a 1971 Ford Mustang, which has 11 miles per gallon, and trying to compare it with the 30, 40 miles per gallon that we want, both for speed and resource efficiencies. And where do we use fax machines? It comes in our service. And where do we have paper? Almost 26% are struck with it. So there are a lot of barriers which are looking at senior management support, which is necessary, or poorly designed pilots, the lack of clarity that is there, and misaligned incentives. And most people think that it takes longer for the peer companies than themselves. So how do we get past it? We want to involve regulators, we want to get pilots going and use clear communications. And that, frankly, is the way we have basically approached our structures. Finally, I'd like to leave you with this slide, which shows that after COVID, there has been a decrease in the amount of virtualization that is taking place in trials. And we have to ask ourselves why, and why can't we go faster? This is a picture taken. There's a reason why we have to use technology, and that is to bridge the digital divide for people who are without accesses to some of the digital tools that we take for granted. Thank you for your attention. We're good. Feel free to talk to me later in case you have any other questions. Thanks.